everybody, my name is Cece. I am here today to talk to you about Tourette Syndrome. So, Tourette Syndrome is a disability. Does anybody know what a disability is? Perfect, well done. Yeah, so a disability condition that makes it harder for somebody to do things the same way that other people do things. So, my disability is called Tourette Syndrome. Tourette's is a disability that means I can't control some of the things that I do and say. This is a really big word. Does anybody think they would be able to say this word? Yes, there.
Neurological?
Really close, yeah, it's neurological. Should we all say it? 1, 2, 3. Neurological. So, neurological basically means that it's in my brain. So it just means that my brain is organised in a little bit of a different way than everybody else's. Here comes the story. Hello, I'm Alfie. I'm 8 years old and I live with my mum, dad and little sister. Look carefully. Do you notice anything different about me? Is it my hair or my eyes? The colour of my skin, or how tall I am, what I'm wearing? Do you give up? Okay, so maybe I've tricked you a little bit, because we're all very different on the outside as well as the inside. Everybody's brains are unique and work in a different way, so that's why you can't see what's special about me straight away. I have Tourette Syndrome. Have you ever heard of it? Do you know anyone else with it? That's why it makes me feel quite special. Only around 1 in every 100 children have it. You're probably wondering what Tourette Syndrome is and how I got it. Tourette's is a condition that is caused by the way my brain is organised. People with Tourette Syndrome have tics. Tics are when your body makes movements and sounds that can't be controlled. You can have tics at any age. One of my first tics I remember doing when I was about 6, and I would wave my hand in front of my eyes. I didn't know that it was a tic at the time, and I don't think anyone else would have even noticed. When I was 7, my mum and dad and teacher said that they'd see me making different movements with my body. I noticed this too, but I didn't know why or how it was happening, and I couldn't stop it. My parents took me to the doctor, and he asked me what movements I was doing and how often I was doing them. He was very friendly, and I found out that these movements were my tics. Want to know more? People with Tourette Syndrome can't control their muscle movements or noises, and we're not doing it on purpose. My tics often change and can be very fast. They happen again and again and again and again. Some of my tics include blinking, sniffing, shoulder shrugging, tongue clicking, throat clearing, jumping, jerking, whistling, animal sounds, eye rolling, shouting, and saying the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Maybe you could try and imagine how tiring this becomes for me every day, and sometimes my tics can be painful. Another type of tic is called Coprolalia. This one is where we say lots of rude things, but we really can't control it, and sometimes they could be silly things, and sometimes it's things that we really don't want to say, some very naughty words, but it's our brain sending the wrong signals to our body, so we can't control what we say. Maybe you can imagine how tiring it would be, because sometimes we can hold in our tics, and that's called suppressing. Should we all try it? It feels like if you were to try and keep your eyes open for as long as you possibly could. So everybody open their eyes like this. And we're going to try and keep our eyes open. You can't blink. Can you feel the pressure building up? It feels like you really want to blink, doesn't it? And your eyes feel all dry and it builds up and it builds up, and then you just have to blink, don't you? So that's what it's like for some of us to hold in our tics.
That's so interesting. Sorry to interrupt you. I went camping the other month with Mr. I was being told by him, stop moving your wriggling, it's keeping everybody in the campsite awake every time you roll over, keep still. And so I was trying my absolute hardest to lie as still as I could on the wobbly camping mattress. But I just couldn't. I had to move. And in the end I left the tent, it was still too much. But I wonder if that's a similar feeling where if you've got, maybe when you get into bed with your parents and you're sitting with them on the sofa and they say, you have to be still, and you almost can't help it.
Yeah.
And that's what it must feel like to be holding it, suppressing.
Yes. Some of the things that make my tics worse are lots of different emotions, like being stressed or being tired, or even being hungry or excited, or any extreme emotions like being nervous can make my tics a lot worse. But some things that make my tics a little bit better is being distracted by lots of different activities. So if I'm playing piano with me, all my tics go away a little bit. If I'm playing football, or if I'm watching TV sometimes. But tics can also be very, very tiring, so it makes me very tired all the time. If you ever meet anybody with Tourette Syndrome, what you can do for them is be very kind. Often people look at us because we're making funny noises, which is fine, but the best thing to do is ask questions. We don't mind you asking questions about it. You can come and ask us, why are you doing that? Why are you making that noise? And we won't mind, we'll explain, and then you'll understand what we're doing and why we're doing it, won't you? Talk to them, be a good friend, let them join in. Don't tell them to stop their tics, because if you tell us to stop our tics, it actually makes it worse. Like Mrs. Comore said, if you're trying to hold it in, then you're more likely to do it, aren't you? Don't treat anybody differently because of their tics. We're all exactly like you, and we just want to live our lives, and you guys can just ignore our tics and you'll get used to them after a while. You can raise awareness for Tourette Syndrome by telling all your friends and your family about it, and what you've learned maybe in this assembly too. And always remember to be kind. Everybody in here has got a brain, don't we? Can everyone point to their brains? Tourette Syndrome is based on how our brain works and how our brain moves our muscles. So, in everybody, our brain is very important. It controls all the things we do, doesn't it? It controls how we move, how we talk, how we think. So, when, for example, if you say, oh yeah, I want to move my arm, I'm going to put my arm up to ask a question to the teacher, then your brain sends you a signal all the way down your body, up into your arm, and it tells you to wiggle your arm and move it up. So we're going to play a bit of a game. So in our brains, we're going to pretend we've got a traffic light. There's a little bit of our brains that acts like a traffic light, and it tells us when we should move and when we shouldn't move. Okay, so when it goes green, we should move, and when it goes red, we shouldn't move. So it's on red at the moment, so our arms are all the way down by our sides, aren't they? And then, as soon as it goes green, we put our arms in the air, and then when it goes red again, we put them back down. Okay, so my traffic light doesn't really work properly. It turns off and on when it isn't meant to. It's being a bit naughty. We're going to try it again, but when it goes red, you have to put your arm down. When it goes green, you have to put it back up again. So, should we try it? Ready? Go. Then go again. Red, green. Okay, well done. So, that's how my brain works. It just tells me that it should be moving when it shouldn't actually be. And it isn't just my arms, it goes for all of the things we was reading about in that story earlier as well, like blinking and shrugging and coughing and making silly sounds and whistling and saying funny words as well. Okay, so the reason it's called Tourette Syndrome is because it was named after this man here. He's got a very, very long name that I don't think I could even pronounce, but about 165 years ago, which is a very long time ago, in Paris, in France, this man was the very first person to study people with Tourette Syndrome and tics like me, and then he decided that all of these different symptoms must be linked to the same condition, so Tourette Syndrome got named after this man. This is the amount of people in England that have Tourette Syndrome. That's 300,000 people, which is enough to fill not one of these stadiums, but 3 of these stadiums, which is a lot of people, isn't it? Can you catch it? No, you can't catch Tourette Syndrome. You have to be born with Tourette Syndrome. So when I was born, I didn't have any tics, but I was born with a gene that came down from my parents, And that meant that I had Tourette syndrome, and then when I was 5 years old, my tics started. You can't catch it. It's not like a cold or the flu or anything. The last thing is we should never copy anybody else's tics. Sometimes they can be very funny noises, and it can be quite hard to just sit there and ignore them. And some people don't mind you laughing. I don't mind people laughing if I say something funny. But you should never copy them because that makes them worse for everybody and it makes us feel quite embarrassed. If anybody has any questions.
Let's give a big round of applause. I'm so impressed. My goodness, your teachers when you were at primary school, if they could see you now doing a presentation like this, they'd be so proud, wouldn't they? I think all the adults in the room have been wowed by your performance there. Well done. It's very, very difficult to speak in front of a hall of people that we don't know and to remember everything you've got to talk about, to be watching the slides, asking for the slides to be changed. And it's really impressive and you explain that so clearly. Thank you very much. Okay, so have we got any questions?
Do you sometimes know when you're doing tics or sometimes not?
I do know when I'm doing tics, but I don't know what they'll be before I do them. So it just feels like, you know when you need to sneeze and it builds up in your body and then you just sneeze? It feels a bit like that to me, but I don't know what it's going to be. I just know that I will tic.
Do you have any other disabilities?
I do, that I am visually impaired, which means that my eyes don't quite work properly like they should.
And when I'm not telling my body to, I shake my head.
Can you have tics, Sarah, which are part of Tourette syndrome?
Yes, so tics are just a symptom of Tourette syndrome. It can happen with lots of different conditions. So there are lots of things called tic disorders, and they're different types of tics. So with Tourette syndrome, you have to have one tic that makes noises and 2 tics that do movements. Also, lots of people just have little twitches, and they're not quite the same as tics, but they are quite involuntary.
Yeah, not doing it on purpose. Thank you. We hear a lot about what's accidental and what's on purpose in the playground.
Yes.
You go.
I get this thing like shivers when I can't control it, it goes like that.
Yeah, lots of people get those, and it's not quite the same as a tic because sometimes it has a reason, but some people get that as a tic.
That it happens for a reason when we shiver because our body's cold or excited or nervous about something. So that's the reason why we shiver. But it's the same thing. We can't control it, can we, when we do shiver?
So I've got autism. It's this thing with Tourette's. I'm not sure what it might be something like a disability. So I can't really control my body.
Yeah.
So like I body quite a lot.
Yes, so autism is a disability, and it comes under the same category as Tourette syndrome, which is neurodivergency, which is another very big word. And actually, lots of people with Tourette syndrome do also have autism and something called ADHD, which sometimes affects how our brain handles things like concentrating.
Thank you. Yes, so it's another way, just the way our brains are made up differently.
Can you control your arms still? Like, can you still get tics in your arms?
Yes, so I can control my arms normally, but I can also get tics in my arms, so sometimes I'll hit things or hit people by accident, but I really don't want to.
But could you like drive a car?
I can't drive a car, but that is because I can't see very well, so it wouldn't be safe for me to drive a car, but lots of people with Tourette syndrome can drive cars.
I think I have Tourette syndrome because I have like tics. Sometimes it's like I can't help but swallow, and sometimes when I can't help but just that.
That's right. His mum went to the doctors, very similar to you, and found out that it was called Tourette syndrome, didn't you? So we got two of those 300,000 in this room. Do you find that you tic more at home or at school?
More at home.
More at home.
Yeah, sometimes we can spend all day at school, and sometimes it's a bit worrying for other children to see us tic, so we suppress, but we don't mean to suppress. So if I'm out in public and I'm on my own, sometimes I suppress, and it's still very uncomfortable, but I don't mean to do it because I'm worried about other people seeing what I'm doing.
And home is a safe place where we can relax.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't it?
And then when you get home, they all kind of explode, and that's sometimes what we call a tic attack, where they happen loads and loads and loads.
And is it particularly tiring when that happens?
Yes, so tic attacks, they can be quite scary actually, because you can't control your body at all, and sometimes I can't even speak to.
When the tics are working, like, do the tics do make you able to breathe or something?
So some of my tics, they do make it hard to do things. Sometimes I have days that are really bad, and sometimes I have days that are really good. So on some days, my tics can mean that I have tics where I hold my breath and go, and I can't control it, so I can't breathe. And then some days I won't, and some days I'll have tics that make me fall over and I won't be able to walk, and then some days like today, I won't. So it definitely depends on the day.
Are there some things that you can't do?
Yes, so I don't think there are many things that I can't do because I physically wouldn't be able to do, but there's lots of things that I would feel nervous doing, like going to the cinema or going to the library where it's very quiet so people would be able to hear my tics.
Is ADHD, like, if something isn't, like, right, like, you have a thing to move it?
That is called OCD, which is called Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and that can be a part of Tourette Syndrome as well. So some people with Tourette Syndrome have things called compulsions, which means that they really, really need to do something. Things need to be symmetrical, so they need to be the same on both sides, and it links to Tourette Syndrome as well.
Can you still do everything you want?
Yes, I can.
That's a good question too, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
And it's important, isn't it, to live your life as you want to, regardless. And actually that's what's important for everybody, isn't it? To make sure everyone can, as you said at the beginning, get on and live their lives. And that's why it's important to be aware of that people have different needs, and we need to make sure we build a world where that's easy for everyone. Okay. Now, we have been in the hall for half an hour now, and there's been extremely good concentration. I wish we had this concentration every time I did an assembly, which has been fantastic to see. I'm sure we could, if there were good questions, Admiral, we could feed the questions back via me, and we could have those answered. But I think probably because you've done half an hour of brilliant listening, we better bring our assembly to a close. Okay, thank you very much. Sarah, I'll put the music on.